A man found himself in a restaurant without a wallet. And he realized that, having just finished the meal. So he told the owner that he would return with payment. When the total stranger followed him into the parking lot and said, "I paid for your meal." Simple stories, ordinary stories, always carry messages. In this case, about a random act of kindness. And they are an invitation for us to do the same. Now, stories, in fact, carry messages. Stories inspire us, challenge us. Stories, in a way, talk to us. And have you noticed that sometimes stories walk with us? Stories can be powerful. They can reveal something about who God is. And we do indeed find evidence of God in ordinary, simple stories. Perhaps that is why Jesus told stories all the time. Stories do carry messages. Now, who is God? That is a big question, isn't it? I would suggest that the most powerful summary in the New Testament, and in fact the entire Bible, of who God is found in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 15 that we just read. Do you realize we actually read the entire chapter? That almost never happens in the Catholic Church, that we would read the entire chapter of a gospel. I heard someone once say that chapter 15 in the Gospel of Luke is the lost chapter, because it speaks about God who is a shepherd seeking the lost sheep. God who is a woman who sweeps the entire house to find one little lost coin. And a father who welcomes his lost son. Now, but let's focus on the last of the three parables that we all know as the parable of the prodigal son. And it starts in this way. A man had two sons, and the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me a share in your estate that should come to me." So the father divided property between them. Now, this is quite shocking, because what this son is saying to his father is this: I do not want to wait until you die to get my inheritance. I want you to give me my inheritance right now and right at this moment. Now, my response would be, are you kidding me? I mean, imagine if your child comes to you and says, I want you to give me my inheritance right now, he would look and say, crazy? But the truth of the matter is that as offensive as it was in the times of Jesus to do so, and perhaps even now, what is even more surprising is this. The Father actually gives him half of the inheritance. When I read this, I took my hat off and I shook it because I wasn't sure exactly whether I was reading the right thing. The Father actually does it. Mind-blowing. So what does that tell us about who God is? Maybe it tells us that this is how much God respects my freedom and your freedom. That's what you want? I'm gonna give it to you. And now, the son, Luke tells us, the youngest son collected all the belongings and went to a distant land where he squandered his inheritance on the life of dissipation. So basically, he wasted everything. Nothing is left. The famine struck the land. The economy went south. And he found himself in a dire need. His work could not even pay and provide for food. Everything around him simply crashed. Life became overwhelming, and there seemed to be no way out. It was a breaking point for him. It was a decision moment for him. And sometimes the same is true in our lives. For you and me, sometimes life can get overwhelming. It can happen to the best of us. But the point of the parable is that we are not on our own. God is there with his wisdom, with his guidance, no matter how lost, no matter how desperate, no matter how overwhelmed you or I or someone else may feel at one point or another. You know, notice in this story, it seems to me that the father had been waiting for the son all along. That he had been waiting. Now, when you look at the son, it's interesting that as he's walking back, he's filled with so much self-judgment. Sometimes that can happen to us. Notice how harsh he is toward himself. He says, I shall get up and go to my father, and I shall say to him, Father, I have sinned against you and against heaven. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would treat one of your hired workers. So as he's walking back, that's the refrain in his mind. I have sinned and I don't deserve to be your son. I have sinned and I don't deserve to be your son. I have sinned and I don't deserve to be your son. He thinks that he is beyond the reach of God's mercy. But we will find out in this story, that mercy is not about getting what you deserve. Thanks be to God. That mercy is much, much greater. It's not about you get this for that. And again, the point of the parable is that nobody is beyond the reach of God's mercy. But there is more here in this story than just mercy. Notice that all three parables end with joy. The shepherd invites his friends and neighbors to celebrate. So does the woman invite her friends and neighbors to celebrate and to rejoice. And so does the Father. God rejoices in all three stories. But notice, the older son did not. And maybe he thought that his younger brother should get what he deserved and not a big welcome back party. Maybe that's how he felt. You should get what you deserve. And look what the father says to him. My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice, because your brother was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and now he is found. Notice that mercy is followed by joy. I love this idea. Mercy and joy, true mercy and joy go together. Father Henry Nouwen, and let me finish with this, in his book, The Return of the Prodigal Son, summarizes this parable in this way. He says, sometimes we act like the younger son in our spiritual life. Sometimes we feel like the older son. He or she deserves it. But we are always called to be like the Father.